Introduction to monopolistic competition. Okay, up till now, we've studied two market structures that are extreme cases and fairly unrealistic. We've looked at perfect competition, where we have a large number of small firms producing homogeneous products with easy entry and no control over price. And we've looked at monopoly, where there's one firm, no entry, and complete control over price. And notice that these are pretty unrealistic market structures. It's hard to give real-world examples of either of them. We've come close, but they're really hard to describe in the real world. Now we're going to start talking about some intermediate market structures that are much more realistic. Monopolistic competition in this lecture and the following one, and oligopoly, which we'll discuss next week. Okay, so here's our diagram again of our four market structures, and you'll see that in monopolistic competition, we describe the number of firms as many, which is fairly vague, but is more than one, but less than the very large number in perfect competition. When we get to type of product, things get very different. We have differentiated products. Each firm has a slightly different good, which is a close substitute for other firms' products, but not identical. Ease of entry. Entry's possible, but there's still some barriers. And all of these factors put together mean that firms can have some control over price, though not a lot, particularly in the long run. So in monopolistic competition, there are a relatively large number of producers. Each firm has a fairly small share of the market in terms of total sales and percentage of total sales in the market, but they're not infinitesimal players like in perfect competition. However, there are a sufficiently large number of firms that they're not all watching each other and reacting to the actions of their competitors. That probably doesn't make any sense right now, but you'll understand it better next week when we talk about oligopoly. Firms in monopolistic competition produce similar but differentiated products. Their products are similar because they function as substitute for one another and have cross-price elasticities greater than zero. Remember, we talked about cross-price elasticity way back in the second week, where it's the percent change in quantity demanded of good X in response to a change in the price of good Y. However, even though there's a relationship between these products, they're differentiated in some way from one another. So when we think of firms in monopolistic competition, we think of them as having sort of mini monopolies over their differentiated product. For example, Coke has a monopoly in the production of Coca-Cola. It does not have a monopoly in the production of Coca-Cola flavored beverages, but it does have a monopoly in its brand of cola flavored beverage. So what are some ways to differentiate products? First, you can have products with slightly different features. Different makes of automobiles have different options available. You can differentiate products based on quality. There's a difference between a BMW and a Kia. A Kia is a fine car, but it doesn't reach the standard of a BMW. You can offer service accompanying your product. For example, we've probably all seen those insurance company ads on TV where they advertise about how they have agents available at all times of day or night. That's a service that accompanies their product, that is the insurance, that allows them to differentiate themselves from other suppliers of insurance. Other ways to differentiate your product is by location. There's a difference between having a downtown hotel and a motel on the edge of town. Both of them might offer absolutely identical rooms, but they're different because of where they're located. If you're in the downtown hotel, you have to travel to or if you're in a hotel on the edge of town, you would have to travel to downtown in order to see the sights in downtown. So there's slightly different experiences. And finally, we have brand names and packaging. You notice I always have that picture at the beginning of lectures that's supposed to be a little bit pertinent to the subject of the lecture. And I have a cart at a supermarket. The supermarket is probably the biggest display of monopolistic competition around because you have various products that are differentiated from each other, often in terms of brand names and packaging. This is where advertising becomes important. Even if your product is essentially identical to other firms' products, you can get people to think it's different through advertising. And in that way, you achieve product differentiation. Okay, so we've discussed now the number of firms and the fact that we have slightly differentiated products. What about ease of entry? Well, ease of entry is somewhat easy in monopolistic competition. It's certainly less of a problem than a monopoly because you can always enter a market with a variation on a current product. But it's not as easy to enter monopolistic competition as our standard in perfect competition. There are a lot of things you have to do to enter with that differentiated product, and a lot of them cost a great deal. You have to do research, R&D or market research to come up with a new variation on the product in the market. And you have to do advertising to convince consumers that your product is different. And there may be large fixed costs and therefore economies of scale for each one of these activities. Because of all these factors, the fact that there's a small number of firms but not too small, that there's product differentiation, so firms have many monopolies over their own product, and that there's relative easy entry so that firms can enter the market if profits get too high. We think of firms in monopolistic competition as having some control over price, particularly since there are many monopolies in their version of their differentiated product.